but it does show that Hope Animation has some concept of what fair use is and are actually exercising it for some of their own promotion and marketing. So if that doesn't make them hypocritical in taking down other creators' monetized content that's transformative in nature, I don't know what is. Well, hello folks, thanks for tuning in. I don't really do reactions on this channel, but I felt compelled to react to Saberspark's last video, why my videos were taken down, Globglogabgalab copyright protection. If you don't know who Saberspark is or what the Globglogabgalab is, I don't know how you got here in the first place, but as a very quick recap here, Saberspark's like an animation analysis and review channel. It does a lot of great, awesome content, and he posted a couple of videos providing kind of some background and a review of animated movie called Swavinsky and the Mysterious House. And even if you don't know that movie, you probably actually do know that movie through the Globglogab memes that have sort of stormed YouTube over the last couple months. The Globglogabgalab is that weird kind of Wallace looking flubbery character in that 3D animated musical sequence, which people have made all kinds of parodies of and just posted obsessively on YouTube and other social media platforms for the past couple months. Now, Saberspark had not one but two videos on the Globglogab and Swavinsky, and they were both taken down quite recently, and he didn't actually explicitly say who took them down or under what circumstances, but it's pretty clear that it was probably the show's creator, David Hutter, who is also the founder of Hope Animation, the studio that released the movie. Now, frankly, I don't know of a time that it doesn't suck when a really talented entertainment reviewer or commentator has content removed on the basis of copyright protection, when they've obviously made a real effort to use it in the context of a review where they believe, and most of their audience would, I think, agree that it's fair use. Now, Saberspark had two videos on this film. One was basically, from what I gather, and I haven't actually seen this video, and I guess I never will now, but it was like a running commentary on the entire feature. And I don't know what the context of was in terms of like whether the feature was blurred out or whether all the audio from the original movie was audible, how much talking there was, how much commentary there was, how transformative, i.e. fair use, applicable it was. The second video, which I did see, was basically just a straight up review and analysis and kind of a history a little bit of the Globglogabgalab. And I had no question in my mind that that video was fair use, and so I was pretty surprised to hear that it was taken down. What actually happened, according to Saberspark, and his side of the story is all we have right now to go off of, but essentially he received, in his words, a copyright strike on the full commentary version of the movie, and was sort of willing to accept that one, you know, there was some gray area perhaps on that, or just that he could see that it might be construed not as fair use, even if he maintains that it was. And essentially the communication, according to Saberspark, was if he removed the second video, which was just the review video, the copyright strike would be eliminated or revoked on his channel. Now, if you don't know, YouTube generally works on a 3-strike system. So if you get one copyright strike, you are okay for, I think it's 3 months before it's removed, assuming you can complete a quick survey, which just confirms that you know the basis of copyright law. But if you get 3 strikes like that, basically within a 3-month period, then you will have your entire channel removed. And there's documented proof of this happening to fairly established YouTubers. Generally, the bigger you get, the more you can actually communicate with representatives at YouTube who would have the potential to restore your channel. But it's by no means a guaranteed process. The appeal process in general for copyright strikes is very challenging and hard. Even with legal representative, small YouTubers struggle with it all the time. I actually feel like of all of the problems that YouTube has experienced over the last few years, this is the one that keeps coming up and just keeps getting more aggravating, I think, for small creators, and something's got to give. I just feel like at the end of the day, if there's an issue that really crushes the YouTube creator community, it's not going to be monetization, it's not going to be other forms of censorship. I think copyright is the thing that just hasn't been addressed, and granted, it's a very tricky topic. It's hard to monitor, and everything comes down to legal opinion. There's not really a black and white policy that would equally and correctly distribute the power dynamic between creators of original content and those who are riffing off of it or commenting on it. But this case is kind of unique, and especially troubling to me because these are both people that I admire and respect, and you know, it's not a case of Fox or Disney or Warner Brothers, taking down the little guy and squashing them under their thumb just because they can, and there's some perception that they might lose some revenue or they just want to set a precedent. This is the case of basically two independent creators butting heads, and in my mind, not communicating very clearly, and potentially disastrous results coming from that. Now, in Saberspark's own words, basically, when he received that offer, I guess, to have the copyright strike removed on the basis that he removed his second video, he didn't respond. He admits that he just didn't respond at all because he thought the second video was absolutely fair use and that there wasn't going to be any question about that. And when he didn't respond, without, from what I understand, additional warning or extra warning, he actually received a copyright strike on his second video, and that was removed as well. So he's now one strike away from having his entire channel deleted. And I don't think that was part of the original negotiation, right? But it seems like he probably was assuming that if he didn't remove the second video, he would just have to live with that one copyright strike. Instead, now he has two copyright strikes and obviously no longer any views on those two videos. But nevertheless, it probably would have been good practice for him to get back in touch with the copyright holder just to continue that communication so that this didn't come out of the blue. And on the part of David Hutter or whoever the copyright owner is, they could have been a lot more clear about what their demands were and what the ramifications were going to be. And this is the whole thing with the YouTube copyright system. Basically, all the power is in the copyright holder, and fair use doesn't really even play into it unless you happen to have a really good lawyer. I've done a little bit of work for like entertainment companies and studios, clients that have actual content that tends to be pirated on YouTube. So I've seen it from both sides. I'm pretty familiar with the content ID system and the reporting system as both a creator and as a representative of a copyright holder. I'm not a lawyer by any stretch of the imagination, and this is all just sort of speculation on this particular case. Now, with that disclaimer out of the way, not having seen the entire commentary video that Saberspark did on the full feature or short, it's 30 minutes of Swavinsky, I can't actually say whether that would have been fair use, but that seems like it's definitely a gray area. In my limited experience, anytime that the content provider actually blurs out the whole screen or has no audio or both from the original project, they tend to be fine. But if it's a running commentary and you actually see the video and you hear all the audio, and especially if there's not that much commentary, if they're not constantly talking over it, if it's, Mystery Science Theater 3000 style, that's not going to fly. It's very hard to justify that that's fair use. The concept of fair use is basically that everything you are showing from the original material, you require to show to make a point or to basically transform the meaning of that work altogether and present to people in a completely new experience and a completely new context. So the way that I look at it as a creator is not only am I saying something different or unique about this video and using the video to back up my points, but is all of the video and audio that I'm using required to make that point. Now, for example, if you're reviewing a movie and explaining why you think it fails on a creative level, but you're doing so with a running commentary on the entire movie and there's a 2 or 3 minute segment over which you're not saying anything, it would be hard to argue that that 3 minutes of the actual original unaltered content is required to make your point. And so I think rightly you would have a real challenge claiming fair use in that instance, unless maybe that segment of the video was, what you were building up to with the rest of all the commentary, and it was really critical for people to see that one segment because it was pivotal to your argument and they had to see it in its unaltered form. Now, again, this is just a random example. I haven't actually seen the content here, so that's a little bit hard for me to judge. But again, even Mystery Science Theater 3000, a lot of people think that that's a great business model because they're just grabbing other content, and because it's a bigger organization now and they have a network behind them, that they have legal representatives. They actually license all of the movies. Obviously a lot are public domain, but for example, even those, they're generally licensing a higher resolution copy or a restoration of the movie. And for all the newer content, they're licensing it just like Netflix or anyone else would. They actually buy the rights to that movie specifically to riff on it. So that I could kind of give or take, but the second upload is the one that's really problematic, and it's especially problematic not just because it's from a small creator who I otherwise really respect, but because Hope Animation and David Rutter and that entire company and organization has actually, up until this point, been extremely supportive of the creator community and the interest that has spawned from the whole Globglogabgalab. I have to look at that word every time I say it. From that whole meme. So not only were they not handing out copyright notices willy-nilly Oprah Winfrey style on everyone who uploaded a Globglogabgalab meme, but they actually they provided an a cappella version to make it easier for people to riff off that particular scene. They were all over it and very inviting. And, some people might say, oh, well, they realized it was a great marketing tactic and ploy, and David Rudder has a business background. Fair enough. But I still think it was actually really welcoming of them and cool of them to do that, frankly, because they didn't have to. And all that they asked for in return was that, if possible, could people please source the original material, provide a source link, and or encourage people to actually seek out the feature film on DVD to sell their product. And that's something that I'm going to get back to later. But again, behind all those memes and countless other analysis videos and reviews of this film that has spawned out of this increase in interest on what otherwise is, I guess, like a 6 or 7 year old film, all of this was allowed on YouTube. That's collectively like millions and millions and millions of views without any kind of copyright strike or protection, except on actual illegitimate complete uploads of the video. And I can only imagine it's probably been a full-time job for Hope Animation if they don't have a content ID system to, weed those all out. So they have a big task. But this again is a case where they had direct communication and direct contact with the individual. And so it kind of comes out of the blue that this one particular review gets taken down. And given the history of the communication and the copyright strike on the full video and the reluctance of Saberspark to remove his review, and the fact that the review wasn't overly positive compared to a lot of the other ones on YouTube, even if they're a little tongue-in-cheek, they tend to be a little more upbeat, comes across as retaliation and not kind of an objective review based on the true practice of fair use or lack thereof. So that's really problematic. The reason I'm kind of on the fence about this one is because, frankly, everybody has a breaking point, and I kind of feel like overall the internet hasn't been particularly gracious with the work of David Rudder. And I'm going to go into a bit of history here, which might not seem relevant at first, but I hope you hear me out. Like many of you, Saberspark's video on Swivinsky was kind of my first introduction to the history of this film, and I found a lot of things fascinating about it and actually kind of dove into a bit more research. And one of the things that I found most fascinating about the background of this film was the director David Rudder's connection to Scott Cawthon. Now here's the deal. Before Scott Cawthon became one of the most celebrated indie game designers and developers of our generation with Five Nights at Freddy's, he was driving trucks and working at Dollarama, but outside of that, his real passion was making Christian games and movies and short films using 3D animation and computer software. And at the same time as he was really struggling to make that a living and not really getting a lot of traction and not getting any support and not getting any funding or sales to really make it a full-time gig, but that he was plowing ahead anyways. Well, all that was happening, David Rudder, meanwhile, was kind of struggling in his own right to find his creative voice. He'd always sort of had like an artistic passion and a burning to tell stories, but he's also pursuing an education in business and trying to establish himself in that world. Obviously had family life, had church, and he was very devoted to his religion. Both of these gentlemen were. Now for the record, I'm not actually religious in any way, but still, I mean, you have to admit, it kind of seems like fate that these two fellows found each other. Now essentially, somehow Rudder found Cawthon's early animation. I don't even think they were living in the same part of the country at the time, but he was so inspired by it that he decided to pursue, basically to self-teach himself animation, and spent years just learning about the techniques and trying to, work up the funds to get the equipment required to create his own animated films. And anyone who's done any form of animation knows that's no small task. And so just as Cawthon had self-taught himself game design and development, Rudder basically self-taught himself animation, and in exchange for some of the support and mentorship from Cawthon, he went ahead and created this Hope Animation Studio and learned web programming and everything himself to build the Hope Animation website and start promoting the films. And these fellows at the beginning with Hope Animation, just to prove the point that it wasn't about profit or monetization for them, early on, they were literally giving away DVDs. They would accept donations, but anyone who wanted a DVD for schools, for churches, for individuals, for families, they were just mailing them free all around the world, which is real dedication. And yeah, Rudder had like a business background in education, and I'm sure they were looking at a way to turn this into a full-time job and career. And hopefully at this point, maybe they have, I don't know. But for both of them, it obviously started as a labor of love and seems like it still is. And this all came at a time when David Cawthon was struggling so much with his creative projects that in his own words, he was basically on the brink of serious depression. In fact, he said a turning point for him was when he learned that his life insurance had been canceled because they caught wind that he had admitted to basically having suicidal thoughts. In his own words, that was a turning point for him when he realized not only does my life have no value, but my death has no value as well. And obviously Five Nights at Freddy's was the major turning point for him in terms of building a career and getting some success both financially and critically. But you have to imagine as well that having people like Rudder who actually recognized what he was doing well before then and not only admired it but were inspired to create from it had to be extremely motivating and hopefully, helped him get past that depression. And there's some fascinating irony and almost epic tragedy in these two paralleling stories and the way that David Cawthon essentially finally broke out with Five Nights at Freddy from a place of complete frustration and bewilderment with the world around him and the way that people could not connect or were not connecting with his art and the things that he poured all his free time, all his passion into. And how did he finally succeed? He was actually a mix of both embracing and challenging the consistent harassment of haters who were calling things that he was creating to be, warm and inviting and child-friendly and family-friendly. They were calling it creepy and scary, and he basically said, you know what, you think this is scary? Well, I'll show you scary. And he goes in and creates this really crazy, not overtly Christian, bizarre, creepy, twisted, scary video game franchise, and it's an absolute runaway success. And from what I can gather, he's donated a lot of his proceeds back to charities and hospitals and probably religious organizations, and he's stayed really active in that community, and he's as empowered with his religion as he ever was, or maybe a lot more so than just a few years ago. But in an ironic kind of way, when he's finally this big success story and has been welcomed into this giant indie gaming community and has gained this fame and notoriety, he's perhaps more isolated than he ever has been in his own community. Publications like Christian Today in Australia basically call his success, quote, a fickle, fleeting acceptance from a world in rebellion to God. And you have to imagine that he probably deals with this on a daily basis, where on the one hand, people who claim to be his fans and support him from the gaming community mock his religious beliefs or his past and his old films and animation. And on the other hand, people who claim to have always supported that side of him and come from the Christian community and love his early work for families, but ultimately were unable to support him in that capacity, say that he's sold his soul to the devil basically and is now creating this horrible, blasphemous horror muck for people who are in rebellion to God, quote unquote. You just can't win, right? But there's something so powerful about his commitment and his perseverance. In an interview with Geeks Under Grace, Cawthon said, I quote, "If you get your heart right and live an honest life, then God will grant you success." So his perseverance is really incredible, and the fact that he still basically is extremely Christian and stays true to his messages, but realizes to an extent that there was a part of him that he was not expressing in his other projects that he was able to express with Five Nights at Freddy. And he's even explained or described the process of creating that game as being one of the most organic that he's experienced, and the way that the creatures he was creating kind of came to have a life of their own. Even as he was programming it, they would pop up and basically scare him, and he would incorporate these things into the game and just sort of use his own reactions and creative journey to inform the process of creating those games. But ultimately, at the end of the day, he found a success, and only found a success by embracing a community that was at the exact opposite parallel end of the spectrum than the demographic that he had sort of been speaking to his entire life. He was making stuff for kids, for young families, and it's when other people kind of found that material and in their own interpretations made it scary or experienced it as being horror material, and he took that and ran with that and iterated on that he found success. So what does this all have to do with David Hutter? Well, besides the background and the fascinating connections in their history, the parallels in terms of the story and how they found success is pretty interesting and telling, I think. The way that, in the same way that Five Nights at Freddy came out of reaching a completely different demographic with a different perspective, the Globglogabgalab was taken by the internet by people of a different persuasion and age and everything else from all over the world, and just sort of given a life of its own. And the internet and David Hutter in collaboration basically created this monster, this meme that is the Globglogabgalab. And up until this point, if you look at the social media of Hope Animation, David Hutter's response has been incredibly gracious. Much like Scott Cawthon, not only has David Hutter embraced his new fans through these memes, he's not berating critics, he's not trying to change anyone's opinion, he's not putting down these memes, he's not shutting down the community, and at the same time, he's not letting all of this noise and extra information and opinions change his own perspective and his own motivations and goals and inspiration for this project, or the way that it's valued by its intended demographic of families and children that really enjoy it. And that's really hard to do. I mean, this is his baby. Consider he literally spent 3 years of his life, not counting, the countless probably years and months, both getting the funds to actually be able to do this and teach himself from scratch art and animation and directing and sound design and, everything else that's needed to put out a movie all by yourself. But, this is something, he single-handedly friggin' animated this thing. If you look at the crew on IMDb, well, there is none. It's just him as producer and director. And when I say getting the money, I mean getting the money to have a computer that was powerful enough to do it in his home office. He didn't have a render farm. He didn't have a studio. That means it was taking him between, I think, 5 to 20 minutes, he said, to render a single frame of animation. So just the electricity bills alone. I mean, if you think about that, he's a businessman. He would know that economically, unless you sell this movie for a lot of money somewhere theatrically, which doesn't happen for 30-minute shorts, it's not a business plan, right? This is not a commercial financial endeavor. This is a labor of love, and it's his baby. And now he's finally got kind of the exposure that he wants, but of course it's not really from the community or the demographic that he imagined or wanted. And yet he's been very appreciative of the attention he's got, and he's running with it, and he's making the best of it. To me, that's not a sellout. That's somebody who really appreciates the transient, the cerebral nature of creativity and art and the way that people see it and celebrate it and enjoy it. But as I was saying, I mean, everybody has their limit. And just as it's, I think, really unfair that Scott Cawthon is now criticized both by the gaming community for his religious beliefs and the religious community for his games, David Hutter's in this position where, it might be harder for him to now get contracts for animation from certain service providers who see this as a negative thing, and at the same time, the people who really celebrate this and love it as a meme or see it as comedy or just love the bizarre, the weirdness of it, are probably not, for the most part, the people who are going to be ordering this for their school or their library. They're not going to be bringing this to Sunday school anytime soon. So he has sort of a branding problem, and it's frustrating because his requests of the creative community around him were so reasonable. If you really enjoy this, rather than just ripping the whole thing on YouTube to make a review or commentary, maybe you could consider actually buying it. There's a novel concept. And maybe if you're creating a riff or a review or a meme, you could include a link to the DVD and just reference at least where it came from and encourage people to buy the videos. And, this is my sarcasm, not his. But, I feel like if you have the time to promote Dollar Shave Club or whatever, all these YouTubers who have their own sponsors and they're running ad rolls, but unfortunately the majority of them have not really taken the effort or made the time to actually fulfill David Hutter's request. And I feel like the meme community has this inherent kind of edgy vibe to it that people feel like they would be seen as sellouts if they include a link to the product or promote the product. Or maybe reviewers feel like it would be compromising their integrity to include a sales link. Even if they're not getting money from it, as a YouTube community, we have basically grown up with the perspective that that's a conflict of interest if you're trying to sell something. And especially if you have a negative review of it, it just seems kind of strange, right? But the truth is, as a reviewer, there was something that drew you to this product. And in this case, nobody that I've seen is really arguing with the entertainment value of this film. They all got something from watching it. They all were fascinated by it, they were entertained by it. So I think it's probably a given that a large percentage of your audience are also fascinated by it and would be keen to see the entire feature. And that's why commentary videos, I think the ones that are done really well, if it's over the whole 30-minute video, what they do is they blur the whole screen and or they cut the audio and they provide a link to where you can buy it, and they say, here's a fun idea, go ahead and support this thing, buy this product, and then you get double bang for your buck because you can watch it just as a film and form your own opinion, or you can play this audio track simultaneously and get our perspective, or just sort of see it as a riff track. And the content creator can still monetized, they still get, 30 minutes of watch time on YouTube or whatever. And the original content creator who created the feature film in the first place obviously gets a sale out of it. And I'm not talking specifically about Saberspark, but I think meme creators and commentary channels that skip that step are doing a real disservice to essentially their own community of creators. And it really shouldn't matter whether it's a Christian children's film or something that you consider on brand for you. But the point is, it's a simple matter of showing respect for the original content and for your fellow content creator. And at no point, under no circumstances, should referencing or acknowledging the existence of something that somebody took 3 years of their free time to create out of a labor of love, and not only that, but extra time to basically, he created like a tie-in comic book. He created a stereographic version. Again, this was his baby, and under no circumstances should promoting that be considered selling out. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, all you're doing is promoting another content creator. And the lines between people who are making videos for, Netflix or for sale on VOD platforms, in the studio system, and people who are creating YouTube entertainment, basically YouTube animators just like Saberspark, that line is blurring. But let's not wait to a point where everyone's sharing the same platforms to acknowledge that we all are part of the same community. There's not a lot of money in 3D animation. You're doing it for your kids or you're doing it for your church community. There's not a lot of money in that. There's no more money in that really than YouTube. Believe me, I worked with people on both sides of the spectrum. Everybody's struggling here, but we'll all struggle a little bit less if we just do a little bit better to get along, if you know what I'm saying. So again, it'd be one thing if this was like, Walt Disney versus Saberspark, but the fact that it's Hope Animation, and again, we've seen this before with like Derek Savage, not to compare David Hutter and Derek Savage, but like Derek Savage and the I Hate Everything fiasco. It's really frustrating. Like, why is this happening? When this happens and it's small creator versus small creator, we can no longer blame YouTube. We can't blame big business. We can't blame commercialism. We can't blame conflict of interest or corruption. We only have ourselves to blame for, as a community, not coming together, not communicating properly, and not taking the time to build a common understanding of what is fair use and what is respectful citing and referencing and promotion of each other's content. And so whether it's Five Nights at Freddy's or the Globglogabgalab, if you enjoy the entertainment value, if you respect the art at all, I think the least that you can do is respect the artist as well and their motivations for the content creation, and take some time to appreciate and value and understand that, whether it's a $7 purchase or it's just putting on your video or telling your friends what the source material here was and why it's so interesting and fascinating. Because while the content creators behind these projects might not be, totally punk rock in your eyes, there is nothing more cool in my mind, nothing more creatively heroic, nothing more rebellious than either of these projects. And the proof of that, the proof is in the pudding, because these things would not have been created in a corporate structure. The kind of passion and persistence and just insane artistic drive to create projects that are as unique as these only comes from within. You cannot get that level of inspiration from any amount of corporate profits or in any other environment. But people are human, and the only way that I think you can lose that inspiration is if you keep putting it out there, and not only do people contort it or change it and celebrate it in ways that you don't anticipate, but they do so at the same time as mocking your original inspiration, your vision, and your personality in some cases, or your belief system, for no real reason or purpose. Now, just to be really clear, I'm not saying that Saberspark did any of this, and I'm not saying that David Hutter is justified, but I can certainly understand a level of exasperation or frustration at this point that might motivate him to start to take action, or any other copyright holders to start to take action against some videos on YouTube. We all have this vision of these people that we build up in our mind, but it's not really fair when we don't really know them, and most of us aren't really familiar with their past work. When I saw Scott Cawthon listed as an employee at the Hope Animation website, here I was assuming that, he's a video game developer, he has some creative expertise. It's not unusual for people to seek jobs in related industries when they're trying to make a go of it as an indie game designer or developer. I'm sure he was just hired for the money, frankly, because he could animate some kids shows. Maybe it's an easy buck. I didn't give him credit for being the kind of person that actually wanted to create a series of Christian kids movies from scratch or build this entire brand around this kind of product. And now in retrospect, I realized how short-sighted that was. Basically, Hope Animation was entirely created around Scott Cawthon's original premises and original idea and vision for a brand of animated kids films, and David Hutter and others took that and helped create that as a reality. But as a fan of David Cawthon's, I was doing a huge disservice to him by making those assumptions about him. Now, with all that said, David Hutter, or whoever is the copyright holder making these claims on behalf of Hope Animation does not get off the hook either in my eyes, because there's some real troubling discrepancies in the way that they've chosen to kind of deal with it. Most problematic of these, and something that Saberspark didn't even mention, ValeSkibum94 is one creator that continues to have at least one, maybe two videos on the Globglogabgalab and Swavinsky and the Mysterious House on YouTube, and his videos are also not from the perspective of the target demographic. They're a little tongue-in-cheek, they're a little quirky. He kind of pokes fun at the series, but he's overall a little more positive, and you have to wonder, with the amount of content that he includes in his reviews, why are those ones not only acceptable but actually promoted by the studio when Saberspark's content was not? And I would be very curious if and how they could justify objectively removing one and not the other on the pretense or on the basis of fair use, to give them the benefit of the doubt. But there's tons of other examples here, not only in the Globglogabgalab memes, but also on Hope's Animation's own website. For example, they are promoting a video that's basically a creative kind of spin on the Superman movie trailer using a animated Jesus Christ biopic. And this is like the perfect classic example of fair use in my opinion. It's probably a lawyer's dream case of like what fair use actually is. It takes some of the audio elements and some of the cues in the narration from the trailer, but it's so completely transformative and different and created expressly to make a comparison between Jesus Christ and Superman and hint at maybe what some of the messages of that movie were or were not. And not all examples of fair use can be that clean cut and nice and pretty and tidy, but it does show that Hope Animation has some concept of what fair use is and are actually exercising it for some of their own promotion and marketing. So if that doesn't make them hypocritical in taking down other creators' monetized content that's transformative in nature, I don't know what is. At the end of the day, this just frustrates me on all levels. I'm frustrated that, Saberspark couldn't communicate more clearly and honestly with David Hutter or whoever the copyright owner is, and I'm frustrated that David Hutter felt the need to actually give not one but two copyright strikes to Saberspark. So now we're in this really crappy situation all around where it seems like Swavinsky probably isn't selling like hotcakes despite millions of views on YouTube. I don't even know that at this point David Hutter or Hope Animation are succeeding financially. And at the same time, we have this channel like Saberspark that is a blessing to the YouTube community, that's just a really solid, good quality content channel that is now one strike away from being completely removed from YouTube, that's in total jeopardy. And despite the fact that they actually have a network at their backing that would have communication with YouTube, nobody wants to touch the fair use policy with a 20-foot pole. And I can't frankly blame them at this point, because again, when it's two small creators battling head to head, it really does seem so unnecessary and messy. At the end of the day, the way I look at it is like, we are all just struggling artists. We are not all Christian. We do not all love horror games. We do not all love memes or interpret memes the same way, but we are all struggling artists. We are all just kids of the internet trying to make a go of it, trying to leave an impression, trying to communicate. And we could do a much, much, much better job at communicating off the screen with one another to actually support our community. So with all that off my back, thanks so much for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. And most importantly, if you agree with anything I said in this, go over to Hope Animation's website, links in the description below, buy the DVD of Swavinsky and the Mysterious House like I just did, go over to Saberspark, give him a sub right now if you haven't already, watch all his videos, send him a positive message, give him some encouragement, and next time you see a meme or a review or a commentary piece that's really entertaining, maybe just go over to the creator's website or YouTube channel, give them a sub, give them a little bit of support, or just acknowledge their existence at the very least. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for your patience. If you enjoyed this video, subscription would be appreciated. If you didn't, constructive criticism or just some negative feedback would be appreciated, in all honesty. Again, I would love to hear what you think in the comments below. I'm Joseph, this is BuzzCuts. Appreciate your eyeballs today, and stay strange.